G'day, Ben from Duck Plain Chicken here with a new build series. This is from the series of Macross factory kits from Arii in 1/170th scale, and this is the fighter VF-1D. So there's 4 in the series. I've already built 2 of them. Please go back and have a look at those previous videos if you're interested. Really enjoy building these kits. Without further ado, let's have a look at what's in the box. Okay, you get 2 sprues which make up the hanger part of it, the sort of diorama element of it, and they all have very similar, I guess, components for the hanger part. So you get this back wall, and then you get this bottom part, which usually has some sort of door gimmick in it, and this one's no exception. We've got, I think these are supposed to be engines, like almost like jet engines. So we've got a few of those we need to build. We've got other parts of the gantry, or this is the crane part, and then we've got this lid thing which flips over in here. More detail parts for the hanger, and this sprue is actually common across all of the kits. So this is all sort of common components, including the figures. So you get 3 figures. I wouldn't say they're really in 1/170th scale, but you know, it's nice that they actually include that. I've said it before, the thing I love about these kits is they're basically a diorama in a box, and they're really good size. They're nice and small. They've got enough detail. You can detail them up more if you want, but I think they're really great. So here we have the VF-1D sprue, and so you can see the legs there, main fuselage. The other good thing is it includes a stand, so you can actually have the fighter sort of sitting on a stand if you want it off the floor. Nice gimmick, and of course the wings do fold out, which again is another nice touch. So that's it as far as the plastic goes. Not a lot. These kits are always sort of, you know, 3 sprues and not particularly complex. We get the manual, typical warning sheet. The manual is just a double-sided page affair. Before I show those, I'll go through. You do get water slide decals. Now, any long-time viewers will know that I've had problems with these in the past, just because of their age, but we do have decals. There is a decal sheet that is sort of common across all the kits, so this allows you to sort of apply decals to the hanger, and then there's one that's specifically for this kit, for the VF-1D. Instructions, they give you a nice sort of this colour call out and sign of the times, you know, back when you would paint everything on the sprue. So it's an interesting way of sort of showing what colours you need to paint everything. On the back, they sort of show what it looks like with the other kits. So of course I've built this one and this one. I'm currently building this one here. So it shows the fighter on the stand and what the final thing looks like. The instructions themselves, you know, I mean, like I said, there's not a lot of plastic, so most of it is sort of sticking 2 halves together. Of course, I'm going to do a bit of detail work on the hanger, include some lighting like I usually do. And they sort of show this nice image, and I know this really captured my imagination when I was a kid. Sort of, you know, if you had multiples of them all sort of stacked up, you could create sort of a whole you know, massive diorama out of all these small hangers put together. Right, so next step for me is to cut out some plastic and start gluing some of these halves together, you know, things like the legs and that sort of stuff, so I can sand down those seams and get that all ready to go. I removed all the parts off the sprues and just sort of looking at what I need to work on. So starting with the base. The base is reasonably straightforward. It's got this little door here, slots in like so. Now I've trimmed the pegs on each side, just make it a little bit easier for it to go in. But what happens is that rotates, and you can see there's a couple of ejector pin marks in those corners, so I'm going to fix those up. Now these little pegs in here correspond to these things, which I haven't sort of sanded yet, but these are the engines, and they're made up of 4 parts. So you've got sort of 2 halves you can see I've stuck together there. Haven't sanded that yet, I'm still waiting for it to dry. And then you have a couple of sort of end cap pieces that go on like so. And they've got 2 holes in them, so there's 3 of them. You want to make sure when you're putting the 2 halves together that each one does have, you know, they're 2 different halves, the one with the holes and the one without. So with the holes, they clip in to, I'm hoping they correspond to the holes on engine parts. They do. It's very loose, so they're going to have to be glued in there, but that's so when you rotate it, it actually sort of comes up with the hatch. So that's on the base. That's sort of pretty straightforward. With the other ones, I've done some lighting sort of in here, but I think for this one, it's not actually worth doing. So I might do some extra lighting elsewhere to make up for it. Just because, yeah, once this door's in place, you're sort of not going to see really anything in there. Now the back wall has the usual affair with the, we have this like walkway that goes in here. Obviously it needs to be glued in. And while I'm on that, it is definitely not a snap fit kit, definitely need glue. And then there's this handrail that goes in there. This piece sort of goes on like so. Okay, and then you've got these sort of rails here that the crane arm sort of runs along. Now, as far as the rest of the detail, they've given you this big empty slot here. I haven't sort of really worked out what I want to do there yet. If you look at the illustration, it's sort of got a whole lot of piping and stuff going on, which, you know, maybe it's not such a bad idea. The other alternative is I could make it look like some sort of door to some sort of hallway or something like that. Not quite sure, but I'll definitely have to detail that up. It looks pretty ordinary just by itself. So that's the back wall, and the back wall just slots in on the floor like so. And then we have these sort of uprights. These go something like that. I'm not sure if they're in the right way, but they're basically what hold up the gantry. And just on these, you'll see I've done a lot of sanding. There's a lot of flash on this kit, so you will need to get the sanding sticks out and give it a good clean. And then you have these sort of girders that go along the top, and I'm going to put some lighting in here like I've done with the other ones. All of these parts have like ejector pin marks, so I'm going to fill them with some Mr. Surfacer 500 and then just sand them back. But you can see all those little ejector pin marks here, so yeah, they need to be filled. The other thing that was a little bit disappointing, you can see the stress marks here. This girder was actually bent, and I think I need to get it in some hot water and sort of flatten it out a bit more. So it hasn't broken, but it has sort of stressed the plastic and has, yeah, sort of shifted out of shape, so it's no longer straight. And that's going to be a problem for when I want to run the lights along here. So I want to make sure that's as straight as I can get it. So I may end up just using some hot water, just you know, get it nice and hot, and then put something of reasonable weight on it, on a flat surface like a tile, just to, you know, flatten it out as best I can. That was the only part that's damaged in the kit that I found, so thankfully it's, you know, reasonably straightforward fix. There's these pieces which go across the front, so they sort of hold up the other side of the crane arm. So they've got, you know, a bit of detail on them. These ejector pin marks, I'll have to fill all those as well and sand them back. We've got, this is sort of the top gantry bit, I guess. So these are sort of common across all the kits. Again, some ejector pin marks I need to deal with. And then we have this, what is it, like a trolley that holds one of the, engines. So this has some wheel pieces, not really that great looking I don't think, but at least it's something. So one wheel has the axle on it, and then there's the other half which goes in like so, and then it looks like a old school skateboard or something. Again, ejector pin marks. I don't know if it's really worth worrying about for something like this, but yeah, just be warned, if you are building this kit, there are a lot of those marks on the pieces. All right, so we've got 3 of these engine bits, which I've glued together. They don't have any pins to sort of, guiding pins, so you've just got to make sure that when you glue it, you get the halves matched up properly. As far as the fighter goes, this is interesting because it's sort of like they've kind of dropped the ball a little bit. It does come with a stand. Now, I haven't added all the detail bits yet, but if I put the sort of base together, you can sort of see by the time the walkway goes in place, this stand is probably a bit too high for the kit, and they don't include any landing gear. So if you're going to have it sort of sitting on the base, it's just going to sit there with no landing gear, which is not ideal. Of course, the wings do fold out, and we have the legs which clip in here. So the other reason they give you the stand is because you can click in the legs and then have it sort of like it's about to land in half gear walk mode. I don't know, I think I'm going to do something else, maybe a piece of clear rod or something like that, just to sort of position it up high so it's not, it's not sort of sitting directly on the base, because it doesn't look that great just sitting on the base flat with no landing gear. The fighter itself is reasonably straightforward to put together. These 2 pieces are separate. There's a top, bottom, and the top of the cockpit. These legs I wanted to sort of show before I glued them together. They do have pins, and whenever I've got pins, I will actually just trim them down on an angle. That means there's less surface area that the pins will go into the holes, and it makes it easier to pull the pieces apart again. So you're still getting the guidance, it's just, they're a lot easier to pull apart. Now, for the end of the thrusters and the bottom of the feet, I think I need to do something there. That looks a bit ordinary, just having those pins there, so it might be just a flat bit of plastic or a bit of putty or something. I haven't decided yet. What else? You do get the gun, which mounts in the same hole as the stand. So that just mounts on the bottom there, and that's why I think it'd be cooler to actually have this sort of mounted on a clear post or something. So I'll actually show that gun underneath. Take that out. And of course we do have the head as well, which mounts underneath, like so. So they've included a reasonable amount of detail on the fighter itself. There are these little pieces that sort of slot on the side that are separate. So they just go in like that. They slot in, which is nice. The figures are a bit tricky to clean up. This is what I call the teapot figure. I'll get it flat in my hand. Maybe you can sort of see why. She's got one hand on her hip and the other one, pouring out tea. Yeah, these figures, they're exactly the same as the other kits, but they're a bit problematic to clean up. They have a seam line right down the center of them, so just be careful with that. I clean them up with a sharp knife. The last thing that I wanted to show is sort of with the crane. So this is the arm that sort of it moves along the base, I guess, and you have this hook with 2 pieces, and it has this slotted piece in here so that it can mount onto the beam and sort of slide across. Now I found that I had to cut down these a little bit, because what I want to do is I want to glue it, clean up the seam, and hopefully just sort of get it into place, click it into place, so I can paint it up separately. Now from the hook, it's supposed to be carrying one of these engines, and they have these little pegs. At the moment they're very loose in there, so they'll have to be glued, but they have these little eyelets, I guess, and there's, you know, one of these supposed to hang off the hook. Now they don't actually provide any wire or string or a plastic piece, you know, to basically hang this from, so I'm going to have to come up with something for that. I did sort of double check the instructions because I thought, oh, maybe I'm missing a piece, but yeah, they sort of show the construction of these jet engines with the eyelets and stuff, and then next they sort of show that it's hanging from the crane with no sort of indication of how that's supposed to happen. So I'm going to come up, you know, maybe a fine bit of wire or a bit of string or something. So what I'm going to do is glue these two crane pieces together. And when you're gluing this stuff, what I find is helpful is using a bit of blue tack just to hold one of the pieces in place. So we'll just get that sitting there. Now this actually does have a pin hole, which makes it a bit easier to work out where it's supposed to go. And then I'll use this Revell contactor cement, and I'll actually put a generous amount on it, and then I'll leave it sit just a little bit, just till it sort of gets a bit tacky, and then I can put the other piece on. And I'm just noticing I've got a little bit of flash here. I need to scrape off. Now for this one, this kit, it felt like there was a lot more flash than on the other ones that I've built so far. So I don't know if that's unique to this number 2 kit or whether it's you know, just a rough molding for this one. Okay, so now I can put that in place. I'm going to squeeze it together, get it lined up as best as possible. This will require a bit of putty. You can see that pretty ordinary seam line there. So I'll wait for that to dry and then put some putty in there. This handrail, and this was the case on the other ones as well, has a lot of flash, but just be really careful. It's very fragile. And again, there's a couple of ejector pin marks that I've got to get rid of. Okay, for these leg pieces, I think I've decided that I'm going to take one of the pegs right out. So if I put this together, those little pegs that you sort of see in there, I'm going to take them out. I think it'll just be better having a hole there rather than something that definitely looks like it's from a model. So I'll just snip out the peg itself and then use the grinding tool to take out the rest of it. Okay, so I've ground out those pegs on the end there, and if you put them together, what you get is just a hole as opposed to some ugly pins in the way. So I mean, that's all going to be dark in there and it's not really going to be seen, but it's a little less obvious than just having some things that obviously look like they're from a plastic kit. Okay, so now I'm going to join them together. So just a bit of blue tack to sort of hold it down, and then get this Revell contactor cement, get a lot of it on there, on the edges, because of course I'm going to be sanding all that. Okay, and then I should be able to just drop this over as well. Keep in mind I've only got one peg in there now, so it's probably not going to line up perfectly. But wherever possible, I want to try and avoid steps. I don't mind if there's a seam line there, but I really don't want stepping. And you can see all that glue sort of coming out the edges there. That's all good, because once that dries, we'll sand that back. So now I've stuck some of these pieces together. You can sort of see where I need to do some putty work. So where the seams are quite narrow, I'm going to use some Mr. Surfacer 500. Might take a couple of layers to get it right, but just want to make sure I try and minimize as much of the seams as I can. And keep in mind this stuff will shrink, so usually I'll apply a liberal amount to the seam I'm trying to fill, and after I sand it, it probably will require another application of the Mr. Surfacer 500. Now if you have a look at this hook attachment thing, this needs quite a bit of work by the look of it, and I don't think the Mr. Surfacer is going to cut it. So for that I'm going to use some Tamiya putty. This is just the standard stuff, I think, standard white putty. And again, I'm being pretty generous with it just because I know this stuff does shrink. Okay, now for the fighter, the fuselage and the cockpit. So just to explain sort of what's going on here, the cockpit itself, it's just basically, it sort of goes onto here. That's pretty straightforward. I'm going to glue that in place, and then I can putty up these seams along here. So that's sort of one thing I'll do. The other thing is that the wings, they've got these little pegs under here that they sort of clip into so that they can fold in and out. I do want to try and paint the wings separately if I can, rather than install them and then have to mask them off when I do the rest of the fuselage. So I think I've worked out a way I'm going to get around it. It's not perfect, but if we have a look at this, it's got, there's the slot where the wings fold out. You've got these gaps here for these rear pieces, the stabilizers, they sort of go in there, so that's fine. The only real sort of visible seam is sort of along these widest side parts, and I can actually live with those if I can get it at least pretty smooth. And I think what I can do is I can build up both sides of, you know, these parts with a bit of putty, and then I'll sand it once it's sort of all together, and that'll give it a really nice clean edge, clean seam. That'll be next to invisible. It won't be perfect, but it'll be pretty close. And there's the little piece that sticks on here, so it's going to make it even less noticeable. So if I take that apart, again I'm going to use some white putty. So I'm just going to run a bit along the sides here. Okay, so I've got that build up of putty on both sides, and I'll do the same on these pieces, on this piece. So along that edge if I can. I don't think it has to be particularly much. Alright, so I'll leave those to dry, and then I can put those two pieces together and do the sanding, and I should get a relatively nice, you know, a very clean seam if I can. So the putty has had some time to dry, and I've started the sanding. So here's one of the legs that I've started on, and you can see there is still a quite visible groove in there that I need to putty up and sand back again. The other side's not too bad. One of the really problem areas for cleaning up is these bumps here. So if I show you one I haven't started on yet, you can see, you know, there's a lot of cleanup to do in there. So I'll quickly take you through how I clean that up. First of all, the fairly flat edges, I just use a sanding stick. This is about 240, I think, grit, and literally just sand the surface, trying to keep with the contour of the piece. And if I can get this in the light properly, you can see the shiny bits there. So that's focus. See the shiny bits there? That's a low spot. So that's somewhere where I need to get some, Vista Surfacer 500 in there, and then I can sand it back again. Now for these little bump areas here, the only way I find to clean these up properly is with a knife. So what I'll do is I'll take the point of the knife and get it in the groove and just run it across. And so I'll do that in one direction. And just keep gently scraping. And then I'll go flip the piece around and do the other side. Now it does take a lot of time. It's not a quick process by any means, but it is worth doing because it's areas like this that are the most noticeable if you haven't cleaned up the seam properly. Okay, so you can see that bottom one compared to the others, it's starting to clean up a little bit better. So it's just, yeah, I do it predominantly with a knife, and then I'll go in with a final cleanup. This is a fine file, and I'm just go in there and sort of give it a light, a light file. But you could do this just with a bit of sandpaper, just fold it over. So that's how I sort of clean up those areas. They are really quite tricky. But I mean, the rest of it, where I've got the putty and everything, that's pretty straightforward. Again, just over with the sanding stick. And then I'll go over with a sanding stick of a finer grit, just to smooth it out a bit more. All right, now for the fuselage, I've started sanding sort of the side of the cockpit here. This side's a lot better. And I think what's happened is when I've glued it in place, I didn't get it quite lined up properly, so there was a bit of a step. So I'll need to get some putty in there and some putty underneath here as well. Now for the side bits, I started on one side, so I'll show you what that looks like, and then I can show you how I went about that. So if you remember, prior to me sort of fixing this up, there was a really obvious seam here. So that is a lot tidier. There's still a visible seam, but it's a lot tidier. And once you get this small piece on, there's even less of it to sort of see. And the reason that I want to keep these pieces separate is because of the wings, because I want to paint them separately. So if we have a look at the other side's still got all the putty on it. And while I've got these pieces sort of pressed together, I'll go through with the sanding stick. So you can sort of see how that's cleaning up quite well. And again, I'll go over it with a finer grit sanding sponge once I'm sort of happy with the amount I've removed. But that's going to be a lot tidier than what it was. So that's good, I'm happy with that. Yeah, and that'll pretty much be the only sort of seam on the fighter itself. Okay, so that's those things. I cleaned up the little hook thing as well, so that needed quite a bit of putty to fill up those seams. Still needs a little bit of a cleanup. These things here are really problematic. So they are in two halves, but you can see there's a lot of detail there. And so again, what I'll do is I'll go through with a knife and just scrape back the glue. Try to maintain as much of the detail as I can. Now, for these pieces, I think I'll actually go in with some more glue rather than the putty, because the putty will be, I think, too... it won't be robust enough when I scrape at it. So at least the glue, I can use the knife to sort of scrape it back, whereas putty will tend to break out of the gap. So we'll end up using a bit more styrene cement in there, I think, to kind of try and fill some of those gaps. So if we have a look at the girder here, you can see quite clearly where those marks are, and some of them are quite deep. So for that, I'm going to fill them with Mr. Sepsa 500, and it will take a couple of coats. Well, a couple of applications, I should say. Okay, so I'll just take a little bit of this on a toothpick and apply it to the problematic areas. Alright, then we've got these pieces. We've got a couple of marks on this that I want to clean up, because obviously this will be seen on the base. So just in the corners here. I'm not too fussed about the bottom of the tub, just because that's going to be covered up with one of those engine blocks or whatever they are. Right. Got some pretty deep marks in this one. So I've done a lot of the sanding work on the pieces for the fighter, and I won't know until I put a grey primer over it how good my cleanup has gone. But before I sort of prime everything, I wanted to sort out what I'm going to do for the landing gear, because it does really kind of annoy me that they haven't sort of thought of how you could, you know, like it's just going to be lying on the floor and it's not really that great. So I went through my bits box and I found these. So this was a bit of a lucky find. There's a set of landing gear, and it took me a while to work out what they were from. Bit of sprue with the numbers on it, so at least I can tell you exactly where it's come from. And it's come from an old Mecha Collar kit. So this is the Cosmo Zero fighter, kit number 21, from the original Space Battleship Yamato Mecha Collar collection. Now this was from this was a repop of the old models, and it was sort of set up as a special box set. I built these well before I started the channel, and maybe one day I'll sort of cover, you know, the older kits that I've built. And I reckon they're pretty close as far as the scale. They're not going to be spot on, and they're certainly not the right style of landing gear, but you're not going to see it. It's just going to help hold the fighter up a little bit so it's not sitting directly on the ground. So what I've done is I have marked the sort of locations of where they need to go. So I just need to sort of get it in the middle. And of course the one on the nose as well, under the cockpit. And I'm going to try, I mean, if I mess it up, it's no big deal, but this is a 0.8mm drill bit. So I'm going to try, might start with one of the legs first. Alright, let's cut one of these guys off. I kept them on the sprue because they are so small, I really don't want to lose them. And they will require some cleanup, so let's see how that looks. Is that hole big enough? That is the question. I don't think it is. Gonna need to go a bigger size hole. Let's go up to 1mm. Okay, let's see how well this works. You know what? I'm almost willing to live with that. I can push in a little bit more. Okay, so if I do that with the other one as well. Okay, so the front one I think is a little bit different as far as, is that going to be a 1mm peg hole? I don't know. I may have to create a new peg for this one just because it's not sort of holding in tight enough. But you kind of get the idea, and that way it's going to sit off the ground. The real test is, am I going to be able to have the gun pod mounted? I don't think I will. Oh, it's going to be close. So technically the gun pod is kind of dragging on the ground, but still I can get it pretty close. So I'm going to call that a win, and it's definitely going to look a lot better up on a landing gear as opposed to just sort of sitting flat. So yeah, if you it's a lesson in making sure you hang on to bits, even the smallest bits from other kits that you've built. I think I got very lucky with this one. While I was looking for pieces for the fighter, for the landing gear, I was also looking for pieces to detail up this sort of void in the back wall. So I think I found some pieces, don't ask me what that's from, I have no idea. And then this is stuff that's used for SMD components. It's the sort of strip that they come in on with a clear plastic cover on them, but really nice sort of detail bits that I might be able to use. And what I'm thinking is if I cut the back of this out and then put a bit of styrene behind it, I can sort of build up the detail and slot it in. Okay, you can see I've cut out the back there. It's a little bit rough, but I think it'll be fine once I get some detail in there. You won't even notice. I cut out a bit of 1mm thick styrene card, make up the back of it. It's a little bit bigger than the cutout, so I can glue it in place and not have any issues with sort of, light bleed or anything like that. So I've got this piece here, which is going to make up the back of the, I guess, the detailed wall. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of line it all up and just stick it to the card, because that will help sort of set everything in place. So let's just stick it on there somewhere. And put this over the top. And that way I can have everything lined up. And I can sort of do a lot of the detailing on the backing plate before I sort of stick it in place. Done a little bit of work off screen for this backing plate, so just before I sort of take you through it, it sort of slots in from the back here. It actually sits in there pretty snug at the moment, but you get the idea that there's sort of some detail in there going on. So it's only made up of a couple of pieces. There's this sort of black piece here. I cut the end off it, which sort of stuck outside here, and it's just sort of supported by a bit of styrene, bit of a step. These are the things that the LEDs, the SMD LEDs sit in, so I just cut a strip of that, stuck it on with super glue, bit of styrene, and just something out of the bits box that I found that I just stuck in place. Just having that wasn't really enough. I wanted something a little bit more, add a little bit more depth to it, sort of seem pretty flat. So what I've done is I've done some sort of pipe work. And for this, I've just used the sprue from the kit. So I've just cut out sort of the corner part of it. And the corners have these little posts on them. So that's what that is. And it was a 2.5mm hole that I drilled in here. And now I can sort of put this in, and it kind of works as a, like a pipe sort of traveling along. So anyway, we stick that in there, and sort of having a look at it, I thought, yep, that's good, but it needs a little bit more. So the other thing that I've done is I've added some smaller pipes, and this is 1mm diameter styrene rod, and I just bent the end of it. You don't have to heat it up or anything, it's thin enough that it'll bend. And I've drilled a couple of small holes. See them, 1mm holes down the bottom there. And so if we feed these through, I haven't really thought this through, have I? Anyway, I think you kind of get the idea. Obviously, I'll need to glue it in place, but basically these pipes will sort of have, be coming from the side, and they'll just have an angle in them to sort of go down and I'll have 2 pairs of pipes sort of coming in from the other side. So I think that'll be enough to sort of give it the depth that I want, and also allow me to like paint these pipes separately. I think it'll work okay. And of course, once it's all painted and everything, it'll be glued in the back there. I am going to put some flashing lights in here. Now I've got this sorted, I've got an idea where they'll go. I think I might put one on the side here and maybe one on the top. You know, just to give it a little bit of interest in there. So that's what I've been working on for that piece. The other thing that I've done is getting ready to light the girders. So like what I've done with the previous 2 kits in the series, I have used a bit of styrene. This is square tube, well, it's actually a rectangular tube stock. It's this stuff by Evergreen. So 3.2 by 6.3 millimeters stock. And if you have a look at it, all I've done is I've measured up 2 mil and then cut it. And so what you end up with is this. Okay. And then that will give me enough space to run what I'm using is 0603 warm white LEDs. And these are quite small, so the wires are quite thin, so they'll be able to run through this. So the way this works is I need to work out where I cut the length of this to, based on the other bits that sort of hold the girder up, and then I can mark out where I need to drill holes for the lights. Okay, you can see I've marked out where the lights go based on the previous kits that I've built, and also I've marked it with F at the front so I know which way to install them. Just checking the length of it to make sure that it's going to fit okay, but it all looks pretty good so far. I've also light blocked the interior of the rectangular section just with a bit of black primer, just brush painted in there. And of course I need to drill out the holes for the lights, and for that I just start with a knife and then take a 1mm drill bit to drill those holes out. And that'll be enough for the SMD LED to, you know, be able to transfer light through. So I'll drill out both holes. You can see, pretty straightforward. Alright, now to install the LEDs I use UV resin, so I'll just check to make sure it's going sort of the way I want to set it out. I'll dunk the LED in the resin, and this is a really good way I've found of doing it, because you can sort of set up the LED exactly where you want it over the hole, and of course it doesn't set until you throw the UV torch over it, and of course that'll set it in place. So I find for LED installation, UV resin is really handy. Of course you can do it with super glue, but the resin makes it a little bit easier. Now I started with the back light, and now I'm doing the front light, just because it's a little bit easier. I don't have to worry about the other wires in the way. So same process, set it down, dunk the LED in the resin, and get the UV light. You know, just testing to make sure the light is transferring through the hole properly. And I'll lay down some resin for the rest of the wires just to hold it in place. So when I'm installing this, I don't want the wires sort of flapping around, getting in the way when I'm trying to glue it to the girder. So it's just a matter of using a bit of UV resin to hold down the wires, also take up any tension. Just testing it to make sure that both lights still work, and to make sure that, you know, the light is transmitting through the holes. Now I need to do a bit of light blocking, so I'll use the Tulip black fabric paint like I always use. And this is to do light blocking on the inside of the channel. So The one problem with using UV resin on LEDs is it works like a light pipe, so wherever the resin is, the light will travel through, and so you just need to do any light blocking on the interior. I've had problems with the previous versions that I've built where I have had a bit of light bleed, so this is trying to reduce that. And of course I turn on the LEDs just to test it. Let's see here, lining up the girder with the channel, and I'll just use a couple of clamps to sort of hold it in place. It's a little bit tricky. You want to line it up so that the channel sides match up with the sides of the girder to make sure there's no sort of stepping. You want to try and reduce the amount of sanding you have to do and puttying. Doesn't really matter, I ended up using quite a bit of putty anyway, but use the clamps to hold it in place. And then I'll just use some, to me, extra thin cement to glue the channel to the girder. Of course I'll leave those clamps on while it's in. Now you can see a bit of cleanup I've done here after the glue's dried, a bit of sanding, a little bit of puttying, and so I'll show you the process I used for that. I used to me a white putty, and I tend to find this stuff goes off pretty quickly, like it dries pretty quick. So I put a little bit in a little tray here and actually use a bit of, to me, a lacquer thinner just to thin it down a little bit. I'm going to put a couple of drops in here. I'm not trying to make it, like paint consistency. It still needs to be putty, but I just find that this reduces the drying time a little bit. It makes it a bit easier when I'm doing this. It doesn't mix particularly well, but that might just be the tube I've got. But it still makes it gooey enough that it doesn't dry sort of very quickly, so it gives me a bit of time to spread it out on the piece. Just using a toothpick, end up using a coffee stirrer as well to apply it. You can see there, it's a bit messy, that's alright. Once it dries, it'll shrink a little bit, and then it's just a matter of sort of sanding it down. So the coffee stirrer just gives me a little bit more control over sort of where I apply the putty. It's looking for those low spots. You want to really make sure those low spots are filled. Just after it's dried, sand it, and it looks fine, and won't know until I put a grey primer over it. Also put a bit of blue tack in the light holes there just to mask that off, ready for painting. Attach the eyelets to the engines, and you just want to make sure they fit pretty loose in the holes, so you need to make sure that you've got them lined up properly. Glue to set up a little bit, and then you can tweak where the eyelets sit. Added some blue tack to some the back wall just to mask them off, and I've decided that I'm only going to go with one light in this backing piece, so I think I want to put it on the top. So I just mark out sort of the center of the top there, and again I'm just going to drill a 1 mm. The LEDs I've got for this, it's a 3 wide SMD LED, but it's a flashing orange light. So I'll just install that afterwards. So that should give it at least a little bit of interest. I started the initial priming and sort of cleanup of everything. There's a couple of other small things I'd just like to point out. I've drilled a couple of 1 mm holes up in the top corners here, which will allow for the wires to come out the back of the girders. I've also cut out some holes for a switch, so it's just about getting all this prepared before painting, and also a hole for a USB-C port, so that'll provide the power for the lighting. Now, as far as the reasons why priming can be really important is you can see pretty clearly with the cockpit here that seam that still exists. So by using a grey primer, it makes it a lot easier to see any seams that you have issues with. And also if we have a look at the legs, that seam there is still quite pronounced. So in order to fix them up, I use Mr. Surfacer 500. Okay, get a little bit on toothpick. And run it around where I can see the problem areas. Basically this whole seam along here is problematic, which is no real surprise. So not only does the primer help the paint stick to the surface of the plastic, but it also helps to highlight any areas you need to apply some more putty or do some more sanding. So I'll leave that to dry and then go back and sand it. But at this point, I'm going to leave the video there, and the next video will sort of all be about the painting and the final reveal of the kit. So until then, I'll catch you later.